You know how this stuff works. You've hosted a show or two in your lifetime.
I'm familiar with what is it, podcasting?
Yeah, I think that's what they call it now. I think that's what the kids call it now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, when I was the average age of the content creator class, now content creation meant you wrote books.
You just manuscripts. That's what was going on.
Yeah, you hand wrote on the quill, you know, all that stuff.
Oh man.
Well, welcome to Dynasty Compass. I am your host, Jeff Blaylock, joined today by my excellent friend, the wonderful Alfredo Brown, fantasy analyst, podcast host. Wait a minute. Award-winning podcast host. How about that? So, Alfredo, man, welcome to the show. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you, man. It's weird and like refreshing and reflective whenever someone's like, "Oh, award-winning podcast host" or anything like that. It's how I imagine actors feel. They get weird when they're like, "Yeah, you won an Oscar or an Emmy or something like that." I'm not in any way trying to put this on the same level. It's just it takes you back because like I forget and like I'm just doing what I'm doing. Yeah. So it's cool, man. I'm so happy you brought me on here today. I've seen clips of the show and been really excited to talk some ball with you.
Yeah, man, me too. And yeah, you're right. It's not an Oscar, you know, it's not an Emmy. It's more like a Grammy, I'd say. It's just kind of at that level.
What's like the lower level ones, like the one they did on Netflix? Like the SAG Awards, where it's like the actors give awards to other actors. That's what it feels.
They used to have like cable Ace Awards. I don't know if they still do those, but maybe it's kind of on that level too. but you know, it's a forebringer of more honors to come. So
thank you, man. Thank you.
So you are up to your eyeballs in a rookie guide as of the day we're recording this, which is I think a Tuesday at the end of March. You just released the third part, the big part with the wide receivers. So I guess the first question I have is, what on earth moved you to do your own rookie guide, which is a tremendous amount of work?
I mean, yeah, these are a ton of work. It's one of my first jobs out of college was I got to work with the FIU football team in the scouting department, and I started off as an intern. When I was a senior there, I emailed one of the guys in the player ops department. I was like, "Hey, do you guys need any interns?" He was like, "Sure, come on in the next day." And they were like, "You're going to help us sort out the films and set up cones and go make sure that players are in class. Here's a golf cart. Go make sure T.Y. Hilton is at his biology class." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, cool. Certainly." And they'd be like, "If they're not there, you got to mark them down." And I'll be like, "Okay, yeah, these guys missed so many classes." And I was like, "Yep, they were totally there. Everything is great." But I got to do that for a little bit, and I was Mario Cristobal's sandwich boy for a little bit, and that led to a little more responsibility, and that turned into, okay, let's see what you got. Write up some reports on some guys we've already done. Let's see how good you are at this. And they're like, "Oh, okay, you actually know what you're talking about with football. Cool." And then you start doing stuff in practices, and then you start to help prep the team and stuff. Not like talking to the team, but like prepping packets for like team practices and sit downs and film studies and things like that. And you get to do some of the dirty work, and then eventually you get to really learn about the game and help with scouting reports. And one of the cool scouting reports I got to write up was Jonnu Smith. And doing that for FIU kind of always gets to be that feather in my cap that I got to do. And it's something that I have always held on to and loved as I've gone into fantasy football. And I mean, I as a Dolphins fan, I've always loved the NFL draft because it's our best time of year. It's all we really have. And I'm going to be studying up on all these players anyways. So I thought, why not do something where I can take a little bit of what I know and mix it with what I do with the Pretend GM, which is try to not just give a man a fish, but teach them how to fish and like kind of go into what goes into the scouting process. What are the terms to know? Why do these things matter when you're scouting a player? And it's just been a really fun process. Honestly, it's a lot of work, but it's been a very fun process.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. I've dived, whatever the past tense of dive is, into each version that comes out. I think I download it 5 seconds after your email comes in. So it's been exciting to see how you kind of go about it. One of the things that you did for this is you come up with your own metric, the PGM score, without going, into secret sauce. Although you're welcome to do so if you want to. What goes into that, and why'd you choose to build your own and not just piggyback on the existing metrics that are out there?
Well, if I'm going to be honest, I think pretty much every score piggybacks off of metrics. Like they all do, right? I mean, from the first person that decided to make a film score, it was based on what they saw on film, right? And then you make X amount of categories, and you give, and this is what I do, is like I make X amount of categories for different traits that I find to be valuable in a player. Like specifically, let's talk about a wide receiver, since I just did that, right? Like for me, route running and spatial awareness are some of the most important things for a wide receiver. So if a guy struggles to run routes, or he's not really good against zone because he doesn't have that great spatial awareness, he can't sit into the soft pockets in the zone, that's going to be a big red flag for me. Like those are things that I really struggle to overcome. So what I do is, depending on the position, and I'll have different scoring categories for each position, is I will make a long list of categories. And it's never equal. It's not like running backs have 10 and wide receivers have 10. Running backs could have 16 categories. Wide receivers could have 8, and it just all depends. And then what I'll do is I will weight certain categories higher than others. So for example, if a player has drops issues, I won't really weigh that as something that is that high, because drops often get fixed at the next level. Drops are also typically indicative of like how many targets a player is getting, things like that. And so what I took is just the film score that I am creating myself. And then I will also try to weight something a little bit more based on what it means analytically, metric wise. So like things like yards per route run have been important. And like, I will look at, I want to give it context, that like I'll look at how a guy does in a contested catch scenario, and I'll say, man, this guy gets a lot of contested targets and he converts on those contested targets. But why is he getting these contested targets? Is it something that is planned, or is it something that he simply cannot get away from the defense? And so I'll try to mix and match these as best as I can. And there's certain things too that will bring up a player's score down. Was he 25 years old going up against 19-year-olds? Was this player going against FCS competition? What was going on there? Were they a later breakout? There's a lot of things that kind of pull you in different directions. So yeah, it is a secret sauce, so to speak, but I'm pretty open about it. There's just a lot of things that go into it, so it can change based on the positions.
Well, I love the depth that you're taking, and you're even going deeper on a metric than just the metric itself. And contested catch rate's a great example of that, because they might be great at contested catches, but would they be even greater if they got separation first? They didn't have to make those contested catches.
100%. And like, I'll look at that, for example, with other guys where I'm like, this is a really speedy receiver. He's very fast. That's great for the athleticism score that I've got here. They do get open. This is awesome. But they don't really know how to do much once they catch the ball. And that kind of hurts their after catch ability. And like, what is their role then? If this player doesn't have a very nuanced route tree, and their role at the next level is going to be a guy that catches the ball near the line of scrimmage and then has to run after the catch, but they're not good at that, now we have a problem. So there's things like that. You kind of have to peel back the layers on players. I know I keep using wide receivers. I'm just fresh off it.
Well, I mean, the player you're describing, great speed, good downfield. I mean, he makes a great gunner for the special teams. There's always a future for a player like that in the NFL.
Yep.
Your PGM score, I don't know if it was intentional or if it just happened to work out this way, but it seems to map pretty nicely to player tiers, and where you group them into different kinds of outcome tiers. And that's usually a strong indicator of performance right there. So what kind of a player can they be? Did these kind of just sort of sort themselves out based on your score? Like, did you build the score up and then see where they were? Or did they kind of land where you thought they would have if you hadn't gone through the actual analytics of adding things together, weighting things, and getting to a score?
Yeah, the tiers have been something that I've sort of built up over time, and like I played with it, and you'll see that like the PGM score is from 40 to 100. It's not like a 0 to 100, or else you'd see much lower scores and different weights and things like that. It kind of came naturally to me. Like the more I did this, I was saying, okay, if a guy is below a 70, this really isn't a player that I'm I'm looking to start or flex in fantasy football. This is probably a player I have on my bench. And that's typically what ended up happening. Now, like any rankings or tier systems, it's not going to be perfect, but it was the more I sort of fleshed it out and let the scores marinate, the more I sat there and I went, yeah, that's about right. And it kind of came up every single time. It's when you're looking across the board and you're giving a player 6s on everything and they're not getting a whole lot of 8s on scores and things, you're just saying, yeah, that's a bench player. So I wish it was a little bit more nuanced than that, but it was sort of just something that fell into place. And honestly, I think, but like with any good score or any good metric that you create, you want to go back to the drawing board each year and try to understand, is this the best version of this? You don't want to tamper with it too much, but you want to ask yourself, is this the best version of it? And so I try to do that year after year. And this year was a very interesting year to do it because wide receiver is very deep. But the other positions are not. So it was quite interesting to get to like your wide receiver 17 and you're like, man, this guy's actually kind of good, but doesn't quite fit into the right tier that I would want to put them in.
Yeah, man, it's tough to reduce anything as nuanced as player performance and development and skill set into one number or one comp or one kind of box. And you kind of address that too, not only with the metric you've created, but also with your comps. You actually provide 3 comps for each player, not the one that is traditionally provided. So tell me a little bit more about the thought process there and what those 3 comps represent for dynasty managers who might be looking at your guide.
Sure, let's do this. Give me a name of any wide receiver, and I will go over their comps with you.
Let's do, you mentioned we were talking about him earlier before we turned this machine on. Let's talk about Chris Brazzell.
Okay, yep. Is that how you pronounce it, Chris Brazzell?
That's how I pronounce it.
All right. Either way, so let's talk about Chris Brazzell. It sounds better because it sounds like gazelle, which is great.
It makes him sound faster.
Exactly. So with Chris Brazzell, his 3 comps, what I do is I give a low, median, and high comp. And I've had a very complicated relationship with player comps because there have been times where, especially when you're just looking at physical attributes, you almost hate comps because what they end up doing is they end up painting this false narrative of a player where you say, well, kind of XYZ player kind of plays like Tyreek Hill. Well, they're not going to give you the production of Tyreek Hill, right? So what I tried to do with my player comps is say, okay, this is a player who the prospect plays similar to. I can see a lot of what makes them a good prospect in this NFL player. They have a similar role that I could see them having at the next level. Their college production was similar. Their athletic scores are similar. And this is also what I see for their fantasy outlook as well. Like you mentioned, no player comp is going to be perfect, but that's why I wanted to give 3 different comps, a low, median, and high. Because if between those 3 players, you don't see a logical range of outcomes or a player that kind of fits the mold of what this prospect does, then either I didn't do a good job or this prospect's just not for you. We see it differently. And that's okay. Like that's a big part of scouting players. But for example, like with Chris Brazzell, the low end comp I've got for him is DJ Chark Jr. as a top 60 wide receiver scoring 8.9 points per game. This is a guy who's very similar in talking in height, weight, speed score, production. I could see him come out of the gate really fast and be a guy who's able to put up points in a big way and then sort of fizzle out once he is figured out or whatever ends up happening with, because while Brazzell's good, he probably won't be a wide receiver 1 on an NFL team. So he'll probably be the complimentary guy. Yeah. And that's where I ended up going with the other comps. Christian Watson is his median comp, a top 36 wide receiver who's going to make big plays, contested catch, long plays, big time receptions, getting a little bit under 12 points per game and being one of these boom bust guys for you. And then for me, best case scenario I've got here is Jameson Williams, a top 24 wide receiver getting about 14 points per game who, like I said, he won't be the wide receiver 1 on a team, but he's going to be a guy that this team is going to target deep, target in the intermediate game to get him on crossers, and this is someone that they're going to draw plays up for. It's not just let's see if Brazzell can beat him deep. They're going to take the time to draw up plays. So that's kind of how I look at this.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it is a more rounded way of looking at what this player's prospects really are instead of trying to peg him either to an impossible level. You said Tyreek Hill may have the physical traits, but you're not going to get that level of production. The ceiling is just not there. So
Right.
being a little bit more realistic about performance, because ultimately as dynasty managers, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're looking for performance. We're not looking for a guy who's physically like somebody else, because they don't physically do things for us. They just accumulate points on scoreboards for us. And so we need to have a strong sense of what that might look like. And I think you've got a really good way of doing that with kind of a low, medium, and high. If you want to bet the ceiling, you see what the ceiling is. If you
Right.
want the low floor, you can see what that is. And then the one in the middle is kind of where you might expect things to land between those.
And that's the other thing too, as you're saying that, is it also gives you an idea of the volatility of this player. Because there are going to be dynasty managers that want to take the safe route versus let's go for the upside. And you can kind of see how big is this range of outcomes.
Well, before we move off of the guide for a little while, why don't you tell everybody where they can find it, since I hope that we've piqued some interest in it from some folks who may be watching on YouTube or listening on their favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, you can head on over to pretendgm.com/guide or just pretendgm.com and you'll see it up there in the top menu. Right now, I've got the pre-order price available, $9.99. That's going to go up after this week. This is version 3.0 of this. We've got quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. Next Monday will be the full release of the guide, where it's going to include tight ends, injury reports from Dr. Vignesh Doraiswamy, the full superflex and single quarterback rankings that you can use for your dynasty drafts, and then we'll do another update after the NFL draft as well. So 5 versions of this. This is the last week for your pre-order price, and you can find that on pretendgm.com.
All right. Hope everyone do that. It's a really good guide. Lots of good stuff in there. We first started chatting, you're talking about, that love of scouting, of being able to just be kind of there and to see it, to be in the training sessions, do all that kind of, background work that makes you a better student of the game, even if it doesn't necessarily translate into anything that would sound like fun to anybody else. So let's talk about exactly that. You got to go to the combine this year.
Yeah.
I assume as media and not as one of the players. And so what was that experience like? And had you been before, I guess, first of all?
No, I had never been before. Okay. So going to the combine was just really, really cool, man. Lucas Oil Stadium is it was awesome. Like, I didn't expect it to be that cool. The city of Indianapolis is really cool. Like, it's not just the combine thing. This is one of those where I'm telling my friends, like, hey guys, we might want to make this our annual trip. Go to the combine, hang out. There's some great restaurants nearby. And the city of Indianapolis is just like, it's really small. It's fun to walk around. And then you go out at night at the bars and you're just like, that was Frank Gore. That's Sean Payton. That's Von Miller. Like, there's guys everywhere. Like, we were sitting at dinner the first night and Terrence Mathis went and sat down. That's for some of our older football fans. It was such a surreal experience. And I don't think, as people, we like sit back and we can watch film or watch games or whatever it is, watch the combine on TV. You don't really get an idea for how big or fast or imposing these players are, how fluidly they move, unless you see them in person. And I fully get that now. When people say going to the Senior Bowl matters or watching these guys at a game matters, I'm always like, you can just watch the film. It's there for you. It's so different. It's so different to see how they move in person. You get a true idea for how it really looks compared to the other people next to them on the field. And you can actually see it at a full scale. It's kind of like watching a movie on your TV versus watching it in like IMAX at the movie theater. It's a totally different experience. It's just, you're engulfed in it, and it's incredible.
That sounds like a really cool thing to do. I have to try that sometime. Wasn't able to go this year, but maybe I will put that on the high list for next year. Is there anything specific that surprised you? And it could be, obviously, your dinner guests or one thing that was a surprise, but the testing results or the process or the performances or the interviews. You already said the atmosphere was really kind of surprising. What surprised you about the combine?
Yeah, I think it was actually how many players didn't participate in the actual combine. And it's one of these things that I feel like it's not just in sports, but it's kind of everywhere where we're getting this like all or nothing mentality. And I think there were a lot of players, specifically some of the like the bigger guys, bigger names that did not participate. And you're wondering, why not? Dude, like we kind of all got wise to the thing that a player would gain weight for the combine, weigh in at a certain weight, and they'd be like, all right, you check the box there, but then not run the 40. Then lose that weight and run the 40 at their pro day, and they're like, oh, look at you, you're fast too. And that was kind of always like the agent thing that they were told to do. Now you've got guys, like for example, I'm going to say Denzel Boston didn't run at all at the combine, didn't run at his pro day. And if I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong on this, you can correct me on this, I don't remember him doing the drills either. So there were just, it was very interesting. Like Mekhi Lemon was another guy who didn't run, but then he did drills. So I think it's just an interesting thing where we're starting to ask ourselves, how much does the combine matter? Because so much was made of this year being the fastest class ever. And it's like, well, yeah, when you have two quarterbacks that run and one runs a 4.5, the other runs a 4.7, it's the fastest quarterback class ever. You're right. 100%. If you want me to be a little more micro on this, I'll say the tight ends amazed me. The tight ends absolutely amazed me to be there and see that and see Kenyon Sadiq's real speed and Eli Stowers' real speed and explosion and what these guys are able to do. It was all that much more impressive to see it in person. That was just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get into some players here in a bit, but was there anybody from what you saw? And of course, as you mentioned, you didn't see some players because they didn't participate in the on-field activities. But were there any players that you saw whose stock went way up for you or went way down because of seeing them in person?
I would say at the time, and it's complicated because I wasn't very high on the player to begin with, but Jadarian Price for me was a guy that I found to be interesting at the combine because he ended up weighing in smaller than I thought. He was like 203 pounds. And on film, he always looked like a guy that was much thicker, probably closer to like 210, 215. So then he comes in and he weighs at 203, and I say, well, 203, this is a guy that returns kicks. And he can get to the outside pretty easily. I think he's probably going to test really well. And then he just barely cracks that 4.4. So I'm saying, okay, brother, you got that 4.49 on a fast field where everyone ran well. You came in lighter than expected. You don't have the great production profile. And you didn't wow me. And I know like his relative athletic score is still pretty good. Like it's not a bad athletic score. But this is one of those guys that for me, I needed that thing to sort of tip the scales. And it just didn't. And I think having the context of some of these other guys like the Emmett Johnsons of the world and the Mike Washingtons, who Mike Washington for me was already my running back too. Yep. And the combine, not that it should, but it cemented that because I said, okay, what's that thing that is going to put one guy over the edge in this like 3-4 way tie here? And Mike Washington, the size, the speed, everything, an NFL team is going to take a shot on him in an earlier round.
Yeah, it's as you're talking about some of those numbers there, and I was kind of flashing back to the Winter Olympics that we just had on the TV not that long ago, and that a few hundredths of a second is the difference between a gold medal and nothing. Right. And it's kind of remarkable too with the combine. I mean, winning 203 versus 210. I mean, 7 pounds is not insignificant, but it's also not a lot. I mean, weight can yo-yo by that just during a practice session. The difference between 4.49 and 4.42 probably isn't detectable to the human eye unless you saw them together. But yet that can suddenly make a lot of difference because of these fairly tiny little fractions. So, you mentioned that the combine is kind of a tiebreaker. It helps you to get some people to go over the edge, you say, versus not. So and you even asked it kind of rhetorically, but how important really is the combine to dynasty managers specifically? I mean, what is it that we should be looking for in the combine results that will help us make decisions on who to spend that first or second or third round draft pick on?
I would say the individual events at the combine are not as important as it's made out to be. especially on TV. And I don't want any of that to get twisted into what I said before, where it becomes this like ultimate tiebreaker where I go, Mike Washington was faster than Jarian Price. He's ahead of him. It's the complete body of it all, right? It's that Mike Washington catches passes. It's that he weighs 20 pounds more. It's that he can carry a load. He can be a goal line back. And he is significantly faster. And I see a lot of the same things on film between them when it comes to running the ball. So like there are things like that where when you look at it in the full context, you're saying, yeah, it is important. We have learned that there are certain things, especially certain positions, where it's going to matter more. At wide receiver, I don't really care how fast a guy runs unless he can utilize that speed the right way. We've seen a ton of guys, the John Rosses and the Darius Hayward Bays of the world, that can run really fast, and they just don't know how to do much else. And so, for example, a guy that I really like, Brenen Thompson, the wide receiver out of Mississippi State, ran a 4.26 in the 40 here. He can actually utilize the speed well. And he can do more than just run go routes, and he can create after the catch, and he can find soft spots in zone coverage. And so like for me, that pushed him up because I already liked him, and I was like, he's pretty fast. I wonder how fast he's going to run. And he ran ridiculously fast. So like there's things like that where it can matter when I plug it into the score. Specifically though, tight ends is where athleticism is going to matter the most. And that's where if a tight end cannot create after the catch, they're probably not going to be great for fantasy. There are very few examples of a tight end having a poor relative athletic score and being successful in fantasy football. No matter how many times we have tried to fit that square peg into the round hole, it just does not happen all that often. I can't remember the exact numbers, and I wish I had it on me, but that threshold for the relative athletic score is pretty important. I think I remember it being at least a 7.00 on the relative athletic score was what mattered most for tight ends.
And, you mentioned the quarterback class being fairly small. It's kind of one guy and then several other guys. Is there anything about the quarterbacks that we might be overlooking from the combine that suggests this guy might be ahead of that guy and might be the one, if I'm going to take a second or third round flyer on, I'd rather it be this one than that one?
Yeah, and a lot of what went into my rankings here were guys that had the athletic skill set. One of my biggest things when evaluating quarterbacks is, can they extend plays, and how do they react when they have to throw the ball under pressure, on the run, off platform? Those things matter because pass rushers are getting bigger and faster every single year. They're getting better and better and better. And offensive lines are getting worse and worse. Yeah, so quarterbacks are being asked to create more than ever, which is why you've got guys like Drake May and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels that can all, they have to be able to run and throw at the same time. They have to be able to lock in their protections ahead of time, make quick reads. This might sound like a jaded Dolphins fan here, but you can't have the Tua Tagovailoas that are small and slow and have a minus arm, but they're a timing passer and they've got accuracy. That's good until you get figured out. And it's sort of the old boxing thing that everyone's got to plan until they get hit in the mouth. And that's what happens with quarterbacks, right? You can have a great first drive. Tua and the Dolphins were great at having an awesome first drive every single game. And then second drive was not scripted. And second drive, when defense started to figure you out, became a struggle. And it just became a thing. And I've seen it so many times. So guys, when I look at a Cole Payton or a Cade Klubnik, there's plenty of things in their film that I don't like. But I'm always going to come back to that athleticism and the fact that they can extend plays. I'm going to say that is valuable to me because I'm looking at the quarterback class. There's just not a lot of guys that I think have the potential to even start. I'll say this. I think we've got 2 guys that can start for an NFL team, and everyone else is here for a good time, not a long time. And that's why when I look at a guy like Cole Payton, I'm like, dude is 6'5", 230 pounds, runs really well. I mean, we're either looking at Jalen Hurts or Tim Tebow, and either way, I'm kind of here for it. Those are, by the way, that's the low and high end comps for him. I'm excited to see where this goes. Whereas I had someone ask me the other day, well, what's the difference between Carson Beck and Fernando Mendoza? I watched the national championship game. It didn't feel like there was that big of a difference. One, there's a lot of difference too. Yeah. One is way more accurate than the other. Draft capital is going to matter here. And Fernando Mendoza being the top pick is going to give him a longer leash. Carson Beck, even if he does become a starter, likely does not have a high fantasy upside because there's almost no rushing there. So the athleticism is always going to matter a lot more for quarterbacks.
So quarterbacks, tight ends really is where you got to get that athleticism going. And speed, I think, is the one thing that we probably spend way too much time quibbling over. It's that if you can't do anything with it, or you can't get open with that, or if all you can do is run in a straight line, then it's not going to translate into fantasy production for very long. Unless, of course, you are in a league that awards you points for gunners going down on special teams, in which case it's a strange league, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Yep.
You've already mentioned, Cole Payton, who I'd put into that kind of sleeper category. I do want to get and spend a lot of our time on that, but I would feel remiss if I didn't ask you about at least the top end of the draft, the first round picks. Who are you excited about drafting, and who are you very nervous about in terms of if you had to draft them?
Talking about top of like a dynasty draft here?
Yes. First round dynasty draft, whether super flex or 1 QB, up to you.
I mean, it's getting one of these top wide receivers, Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon. I think all three of them are your kind of can't miss picks. And for example, specifically in Superflex, I still have all of them ranked ahead of Fernando Mendoza. Mm-hmm. Mendoza's not a bad player by any means, but I think there are 4 skill players in this draft that have more value than a quarterback, even in Superflex leagues. So that's something that I'm going to keep leaning on, even when I go into my drafts. And I know that's not common. There are people that are going to say, take quarterbacks, especially number 1 pick quarterbacks that have a longer shelf life, a longer leash. Yep. But once again, I'm going to go for upside. If I can have a guy who can be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver for me, potentially with that upside, versus a quarterback who I don't quite see that same fantasy upside for him. So I'm drafting a guy for floor. I'm drafting a quarterback 2 versus a guy who's got top 5, top 10 wide receiver upside. That's going to be different for me. So like those are some of the guys and that's very obvious, right? If I can go with maybe a less obvious one that I think more and more people have started to fall in love with, it's Omar Cooper Jr., the wide receiver from Indiana, who I remember sitting at the combine, and I'm there at an Airbnb house with Chris Allen and Jagger May, Rich Rebar, a bunch of guys. And I'm sitting there watching film on players, and I start watching Omar Cooper Jr. I'm like, guys, what in the world are we doing? Why has this guy not been talked about in the first round? Mm-hmm. And it was funny. It was like same day, Daniel Jeremiah drops his rankings, and he's got Omar Cooper in his top 20. And someone asked, like, why did he jump in from top 50 to top 20? Or outside of the top 50 to top 20, he's like, oh, I just got to the film on this. And I was like, yeah, man, it seems like everyone did at this exact same moment, like all same day. And I was just so impressed with him. And you can go into more of the details in the rookie guide, but there are just some players that really stand out to me when I'm watching the film, and he was one of them.
You've got these guys who will jump up there because we start paying attention to them more than because suddenly they're athletically better than they were. They're the same that they were before. We just haven't been able to focus on that. Our eyes are drawn by some of the top guys, including, the presumptive number 1 overall pick. I'm with you in seeing him as a decent QB2 in a super flex league, but not really a lot of upside. He's not a difference maker. He's not going to be a franchise kind of quarterback in a dynasty sense. He might be in a real sense. I think he's going to be a better actual football player than a fantasy football player. So let's talk some sleepers. We like to do things in depth here because a lot of shows focus on the first round, and it's actually the second and third and even fourth rounds where dynasties are won or lost. So, this is kind of free form here. You can just start naming players. We could talk about different positions. The quarterback class is pretty weak, and you've already mentioned Peyton. I think he's probably your sleeper there. If you have another one, you can throw that out there. But which are the kinds of players you really would be targeting with your second and third, and if you're in those deeper leagues, 4th round picks out of this class?
Yeah, I think a little bit will change once these players get drafted because I think, draft capital will tell you a lot of the story as well, not just how early they get drafted, but what situation they get drafted to. I do understand the concept that you need to bet on the talent. So I'm still doing that, and that's why I have my initial set of rankings. But where these guys land and how high they land will manipulate this just a little bit. But, one of the sleepers that I really like is Ted Hurst, the wide receiver. And I'm pulling up his player profile here as I have it in the rookie guide. But Ted Hurst out of Georgia State, man, he's just got this size speed combo, 6'4", 206, runs a 4.4. And it's not just that he's big and fast, it's that he actually knows how to use it. He runs crisp routes. He wins on contested catches. There's just a lot of things that he can do. He's got a really impressive body control that allows him to just make these fluid moves where he can go from catching to running after the catch, or being able to contort his body to catch a ball that's behind him. Remember, he was on Georgia State. This was one of the worst college football teams in the nation. They went 1-11 this last year, and he was still able to be incredibly productive. And like looking back, 34 catches of 20 plus yards over the last two seasons led the FBS. Like, it's just, he's a big play waiting to happen. There's a lot of George Pickens to his game. I did comp him to Donovan Peoples-Jones, Alec Pierce, and Brian Thomas as his sort of range of outcomes. And the Brian Thomas might leave a nasty taste in some people's mouths, but we can remember how good he was in his rookie season and what that can mean, especially for a guy like Hurst, who's probably going to be, if he can sneak into day 2, I'm going to be thrilled with that. And he's a round 3 pick. He's probably going somewhere around 3 or 4. And I think if he ends up on day 2, that'll be huge for him. And I got to get you some other guys here. I mentioned Brenen Thompson earlier, who I think he's very small. Like, I don't think he is very small. He's 5'9", 165 pounds, if I'm remembering correctly. There's some stuff there that's going to obviously worry you, but it's the skill set translates to good route running. And that was something that's really exciting for me to see, that he can be used in the slot and like actually catch real routes, not just be some sort of gadget player. And so that was really exciting to see. Man, if I'm going to get, how crazy do you want me to go? You want me to go like
Looney Tunes, man? Here? Let's go Looney Tunes.
Oh man. All right. Okay. Let's do this. Jaydn Ott, I think, is a really interesting running back prospect who technically is out of Oklahoma, but even he has said that he wants to say that he is from Cal, because that's where he had started his career. And Ott was really interesting, man. He was a freshman breakout. He was fantastic. I think 2 years ago, if you asked people where would Jaydn Ott get drafted, they would have said he's a second round running back with like a very similar profile to like a DeAndre Swift of sorts. But he still ran well at the combine. He showed out well at the Senior Bowl and throughout practices. He's got some decent size. I won't say good. Yeah. He looks smaller on film, but he's 5'11", 208 pounds, so he's bigger than Jadarian Price. He catches the ball really well. He's a smooth runner. When I give you the comps, it may not sound sexy, but that's just because running back's not sexy this year. Right. But the comps were Savon Ahmed, Ty Chandler, and Jerome Ford. And Jerome Ford, we saw him become a starting NFL running back and have some sort of fantasy relevance. So right now, Jaydn Ott is going like undrafted in a lot of these early rookie drafts, or he's going late 4th round. I'm like, listen, if you can get yourself a flex-worthy running back potentially in the future in the 4th round of your rookie drafts, I think that's exactly what you go for.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this past season with Bill Krosky-Merritt. I mean, you've got these guys who can come out of nowhere if the right situation happens. And yes, it may require several dominoes to fall a certain way for that to happen. But at the running back position, given how many injuries there are and how often you are pulling guys off the waiver wire in the very back of your bench and throwing them into a starting lineup, that kind of upside that Ott has strikes me as somebody that you'd love to have already sitting there, so that you are not fighting other people in fab budgets and waivers and other sorts of matters to try to get this guy. He's already either on your taxi squad or already on your bench.
Can I throw one more at you here?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I was just remembering it as you were talking. This was a guy that even his player comps were just like straight upside. And it's a really late player. It's my wide receiver 23 in the rookie guide. It's CJ Daniels out of Miami. And CJ Daniels was a guy that he played at Liberty. And he played at Liberty so long ago that he played with Malik Willis. And then he, after multiple years, I believe it was 4 years at Liberty, I think of 3 years at Liberty, he then transfers to LSU. It doesn't quite work out there. He has minimal production. Then he goes to Miami, where the production still didn't jump very high, but he had this great junior season with over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns at Liberty. That's what allowed him to transfer to these big programs. He's got the size, 6'2", 200 plus, ran a decent 40, not great. He's not going to blow you away. But what he does is he's just got incredible body control. And that's something to me that is super important for a player to be able to run good routes, to make contested catches. You turn on his film of Miami versus Notre Dame, and he's got this just insane one-handed catch that he's making over other NFL prospects. I think he's a big reason that Carson Beck actually looked good for the University of Miami this year. And he's a guy that I think just oozes potential. He may not get drafted very high in the NFL draft. There's a possibility he goes undrafted, but we've seen the breakout potential with 1,000-yard seasons. We've seen him go to bigger programs, and some of the comps I had for him was Tyler Johnson, Dontavian Wicks, and Rashad Bateman. And it feels like with Dontavian Wicks and Rashad Bateman, we're still waiting for the breakouts there. Right. And that might be the same story with Daniels, but he was a guy that just really intrigued me the later I got into the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, he strikes me as that as well, just somebody that again, with the right opportunity, the right set of injuries in front of him, the right kind of combination, maybe that familiarity with Malik Willis puts him in Miami. He'd be a natural plug and play for whoever is playing wide receiver in Miami these days. But yeah, this is that sort of insight though, is to when you have those picks that are practically throwaway picks at the bottom of your draft, who gives you an opportunity for something? You obviously can't be looking for a Puka Nacua in every third or fourth round pick, because that just comes along once every few years. But you could still, there's a lot of us who put Dontavian Wicks in our lineups this year, and he did fine with us when he was out there. Occasionally flashed some brilliance, sometimes gave us the kinds of low floors you expect from players that you would get at this point in your dynasty draft. So Let's shift it for a second. I know you are focused. You've been focusing on wide receiver. Tight ends are still kind of a coming attraction for you in terms of your guide preparation. So if you're not ready to go real deep on that, you can pick somebody higher up. But who are those athletic tight ends that you would say if you're on the clock at the 3:06 and this guy's still on the board, you should be salivating, take him and park him till he can develop?
I mean, yeah, I think that Max Klare is one of those guys. He's the third tight end for pretty much everyone. And as I go through my rankings, I'm pretty sure he'll end up being my third tight end. He's probably going to be a guy that gets drafted earlier than everyone thinks, because in fantasy, we just kind of look at the guys that produce some of the wow numbers, and we forget that there are always going to be these balanced guys like the Tucker Crafts of the world that come up out of nowhere and make some big plays. And Max Klare kind of reminds me of that as well. Michael Trigg is a guy that I think is interesting because I think he's a good football player. He recently had a very weird pro day where everything was kind of wonky for him on his jumps and his runs, and he looked like he may have been injured and just trying to push through it, and that's going to really affect his relative athletic score and the way he's profiled. One of my favorite things, by the way, is I've become friends with Max Toscano, who is currently charting tight ends for reception perception, and I had him on the Pretend GM, and we talked about scouting tight ends. And it's interesting because from fantasy perspective, we're always just looking at who's athletic, who can run fast, right? And he's talking about how important it is that these guys are able to block. And it's not just that they can block, it's that they can do both. And that is something that is just extremely important. So I'm talking late guys, like maybe the end of your fourth round. I'm talking about guys like Sam Roush, Oscar Delp. These are like very interesting names. Oscar Delp just had a fantastic pro day where he ran really well. One of the guys that Max is always talking about is Eli Raridon from Notre Dame. I don't even think he's going to get drafted in your dynasty leagues. He's one of those guys you can grab right off the waiver wire and stash him. It's not a very top heavy tight end class, but I think it's a very deep class that's going to give you a lot of guys that are going to get on the field, because the NFL's moving a lot more towards two tight end sets.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask you about that, since we do see a shift into more multiple tight end sets and heavier packages. That combination of which one of the receivers is going to be the one that leaks out to catch that ball is kind of important. But if you can't block, you're not going to be any of those receivers that are on the field. So that is certainly something that I don't know that we necessarily overlook it, but because it doesn't generate fantasy points for you, it's not easy to pay attention to something like blocking. But that is something that your film study is picking up on, because I know you're watching that like a hawk. Are there any other like anyone whose blocking concerns you when a blitzer comes flying at his quarterback, who is more of a matador to you than an actual blocker? Waves the red cape, lets the guy go flying by him.
That's a great question. And I will say Kaytron Allen is one of those guys that came up for me, the running back out of Penn State, who he's got the size, 216 pounds, and he's sort of a rumbler. I comped him to Malcolm Brown, Jordan Mason, and Brian Robinson. The problem with Kaytron Allen is he's got a very limited receiving game. And on top of having a limited receiving game, he just also doesn't block very well. So you're talking about a guy who will almost never be a 3-down back and never be out there on 3rd down. So you're kind of hoping he gets this early down work, which there's not a lot of Nick Chubbs anymore. Like there's just not a lot of guys that do that. You're either good at everything or you're likely not getting on the field because the NFL has been such a passing league. I know there's a push back to running the ball more, but you also want to be able to disguise your looks here. So like that's something I'm going through. Jerian Price, I know I've mentioned him a couple times negatively. It's another one who really struggles in pass protection. So it's not just, can he prove that he can catch the ball? He's got to be able to pass protect as well. And then this one's not going to be fun for people to hear, but Kenyon Sadiq sort of struggles in pass pro. And if you're drafting Kenyon Sadiq early, you're probably not asking him to do a whole lot of that. But I think that Kenyon Sadiq right now is probably going to profile a little bit more like a Kyle Pitts, where we get really excited about his athleticism, but the way he's going to get rolled out for the NFL is going to be little by little. And he could become very touchdown dependent, or he's going to have to get some schemed up touches, which is not a dirty word. Right. I know we've kind of turned that into a dirty word in fantasy, is schemed touches, but it can be good for him because he can run after the catch. But I think there's going to be, especially in a 2 tight end league like the NFL now, there's going to be times where Kenyon Sadiq is probably just going to become part of the offense and not the offense. And that's what you want out of a top tight end. And like one of the guys I'll probably end up comping him to is Jonnu Smith. Good player when he gets the ball, but he's going to be part of an offense, not the offense.
That's a good point there, because I think there is some expectation. I've seen Sadiq in Dynasty mock drafts going at that 106 position, coming right after those three main wide receivers. And I'm with you, and like, okay, this is an extraordinarily athletic guy, but is he actually going to see enough of the field and be enough of the offensive focus to justify that draft capital? He strikes me as almost somebody I'd rather trade for after next season, when he has perhaps not lived up to that kind of potential, and I've got a dynasty manager who's frustrated with him, a la Kyle Pitts of the last several years that have been available that way because he's not lived up to expectations. So Sadiq does concern me in that way. That do we look too much at his offensive potential? Is he too much of a ceiling play for us? And are we not being realistic about what his, not his floor, but what that middle ground is going to look like?
100%. Yep.
So, we've covered a number of guys here, so we may have already hit all of them, but I know that in the rookie guide that you've created, you note some players as being pretend GM gems. What stood out about those players collectively as a group, if there is any one or a couple of things? And then are there any we haven't mentioned yet that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost for me, this is just, it's going to sound kind of corny, but it's the thing that I also know this for a fact, at least from my experience at a small college program. When you're watching the film and one guy goes, wow, all of a sudden the rest of the room is like, what? Whoa, what happened? And they all start to look at it and they go, damn, that's a good play. And even if it's just one play, it becomes the thing that everyone remembers. And I don't want to give too much weight to a player making a single play, but oftentimes if I am watching a player and they make me just go, wow, that was awesome, I'm going to hold on to that as I continue to watch. And if there's enough of those wow plays and there's not a huge red flag anywhere else, I'm saying, I like this guy. And oftentimes too, they end up scoring a bit higher for me anyways, because there's just enough things that I like analytically and on film that they're going to be higher for me in my rankings, but also higher than consensus. And that's another thing that I tried to bake into this. When I am higher than consensus, and when I say consensus, I've partnered with Draft Sharks and Fantasy Pros to provide their rookie rankings as well on the Pretend GM draft guide. So you not only get my rankings, but you get rankings from the top 3 experts over at Fantasy Pros, Andrew Erickson, Derek Brown, and Pat Fitzmaurice, and then the experts over at Draft Sharks. So it's a big consensus of like 6-7 people. Oh man, I can't believe I just did that. 6-7. Sorry. Sorry everybody with I'm ashamed. Scarlet letter myself.
We're gonna take that podcast award away from you.
Yeah, I'll trade that in right now. But when I find that not only did I like a player's film and I liked their numbers, and then I end up being higher than consensus on a player, and I find that you can also draft this player at a value, I'm saying, to me, this is a gem. This is a guy that when I bring, listen, whether you're using your laptop or you're bringing that sheet of paper to your rookie draft, those are the guys I'm going to put a little star next to on my rankings, or I'm going to highlight them saying, this is a guy that if they fall to my pick here, I want them. And that's more or less how I'm looking at this. I think there's a beautiful simplicity of just saying, I like that guy more than everyone else. I want to take them when I can.
Yeah, we often overlook sometimes that the most fundamental rule to me about dynasty fantasy football is go get your guys. If you want to, if you need to overpay, you overpay. If you want to take one guy with upside over some guys with a steady floor, you do that. If you want the steady floor because you really like the way this guy plays, you go get him. So at the end of the day, it's really, you're the one who has to live with the decision of who you drafted. So you might as well make a good one based on what you really want to believe and who you want to cheer for on Sundays. Right. I'm in a couple of really sicko leagues that go 6 rounds, so we're even deeper than some of the guys you have covered. You and I don't think are in a league together. We need to fix that this season. Do. But if you, I don't know that I want to even ask you if you're looking at round 6. who are you going for? So let me pivot from that into just how excited are you to use rookie picks this year as actual picks, or are you really looking to kind of trade them off, trade down, or trade out? I mean, kind of what's having scouted nearly this entire class, you got tight ends still to come. Is your comfort level with the class such that you want to be taking your first and second round picks? Or are you looking to pawn those off onto someone else and let them take the risk this year?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. It's not a good class. It's just not. And as much as that might hurt us as content creators when we have to talk about rookies or sell rookie guides, please go buy the rookie guide. It's not a great class. But in a way, I think that means you need to know more about these rookies than ever before, because it's not just throwing a dart and you're going to find a good player somewhere. It's a needle in a haystack type thing where there's going to be plenty of these guys. There's going to be 70, 80 players that get talked about, but there's not going to be really that many that are actually good enough for fantasy production. So it's that much more important to really understand what you're looking at. So I do think, and this is something else that you have written here, so I hope I'm not stepping on the way the questions get asked, but
not at all.
I think we do this too much, man, where we say this class is bad, next year looks amazing. Trade your picks this year for next year. And then we get to next year and we go, this class sucks too, but next year is going to be insane, And it just we kind of keep kicking the can down the road. If rookie drafts almost feel like Marvel movies, where it's like you get 2 or 3 bad ones in a row, and you're like, yeah, but wait for that Doomsday, man, that's really gonna rip. And then you get to your 2028 rookie draft, and you're like, well, this didn't turn out how I expected, and you keep punting. Listen, I think that what's more important is understanding what you're actually doing that year. I think that's some of the things that we struggle with in both our rookie drafts and just as dynasty managers, is understanding if you're actually competing. The amount of times I get a question where someone's like, hey, should I make this trade? And I go, well, are you competing? And they go, yeah, here's my roster. And I'll go, brother, you're not competing. I'm sorry, like that's not a top 3 team in your league. Like there's no shot you're competing. And I think that's the biggest thing that happens to us is we lie to ourselves and we say, I don't need any of these rookie picks. I'm going to compete for stuff this year. I think that ends up being some of the biggest mistakes we make. I know this is not a great class, but I do think there is still value to be had in it. Especially like when I list some of these guys like a CJ Daniels, like CJ Daniels is probably going to be a 5th round pick in rookie drafts if you're going longer or end of the 4th round. Oscar Delp was a guy I said earlier who's probably going to be a 5th or 6th round pick. I'm not super excited about the quarterback position, but hey, if you want to take a swing on Taylen Green, I'm not going to judge you for it. That's a fun one there. And I think some of these tight ends get really fun later down the lines too, man. There's just some guys with athleticism and the ability to play. So yeah, like I think there's some value in some of these spots, but I'd be lying to you if I said it was a good rookie class. It just simply isn't.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with your thought about sometimes we just kick the can too far down the road because those goalposts look better than the ones we've got here. Because we can see the ones we've got here, we just imagine what the ones look like down the field.
Yeah, man.
And I also love that you're just being honest about what your roster really is and what you're trying to do. I mean, this show is called Dynasty Compass for a reason. We use the compass as a navigation aid, and you want to go in one direction basically to get where you're going before you can go on to that next destination. And I see a lot of people with middling rosters taking chances on things that you should only be doing if you are a top 2 or 3 team and really vying for that championship. Of course, you can win a title out of that last playoff spot. I know I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. That's not an efficient way of winning championships. Actually, getting a contending team together is a way of doing that. And the first step is actually just being honest with yourself as to what you have, what you're trying to do. I love your concept of the way you put it of, use your picks this year for what you're trying to do for this year. If you're trying to get youth and talent in, you do that. If you're trying to get veterans in, you trade those picks away. But looking at the class just as in a vacuum and those picks in a vacuum, you're probably going to be giving up value just because you don't like the way this class looks this year. And I think that's a mistake that folks are going to be making. Probably a mistake I will make. At least once, because I get frustrated with the wide ranges of outcomes that we see in some of these players. And do I really want to spend a 1st round pick on this? I don't know. He could be great. He also could sit on a bench for years. I just don't know what to do there.
Yeah, man. And it's funny because like I always want to try to remember that the draft picks I have are currency and not anything else. They're not guaranteed players just yet. And I've kind of found that some of the best times to make trades is when the NFL draft is going on or right after the NFL draft, because people in your league think they have an idea of where things are going to go and how it's going to go down. And it almost never goes down that way in the actual rookie drafts. And it's funny because like everyone says, oh, I'll just trade my 1st round pick for XYZ player or for a 1st round pick next year. And then that like 104 you had this year becomes the 112 next year. And you're like, well, that really wasn't as valuable as it could have been. One of the things I love to do is if I'm not sold on this class is I'm going to take some of these picks and go after guys that I think could break out next year. Some rookies that were a little disappointing last year, or a guy I mentioned before as a comp, a Brian Thomas, who had the disappointing sophomore season, but it's been such a talking point. I'd be shocked if the Jaguars are not trying to fix that going into this next year, especially with Travis Hunter moving to defensive back. And I know it's a very specific example I'm giving there, but I think that helps kind of set the tone for how you can best use some of these rookie draft picks that you don't want to use this year. Trade one of those firsts and maybe like a wide receiver 3 or 4 for a guy like a Brian Thomas and see how that works out for you.
I think it's great advice. Great advice, Alfredo. Thanks so much for joining me today, man. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk through some rookies with us, especially those deeper guys that no one has turned their attention to just yet, but probably should as the NFL draft is coming and as rookie drafts are coming. But before we go, tell everybody where they can find you, and they can find you in a number of places. So make sure you tell us all.
Yeah, man. So you can find me on any social media platform. It's going to be at Alfredo A. Brown. And then you can always find my show, the Pretend GM Fantasy Football Show, wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. There's not going to be an episode today as we're recording because I didn't record them, but I will be back later this week. And normally I do 2 episodes a week. And as always, like I mentioned, you can get the Pretend GM Rookie Draft Guide at pretendgm.com/guide, or if you just go to that main page, you'll be able to see it there.
And you did mention the Marvel movies a little bit ago. You also have another project that really touches a different aspect of fantasy. So be sure you tell everyone about that too, because that's really cool thing that you do with that.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, the other show that I do with some really just close friends is called Unbinged, and what we love to do is just we break down these shows, movies, or entertainment news that our audience loves to binge, man. So like we've been watching different shows like The Pit over on HBO Max, and Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and Paradise, and different stuff on Apple TV, and we watched Project Hail Mary, and we did a rewatch of the movie Sinners and One Battle After Another, and we've had so much fun doing that stuff. And we're dropping 3 or 4 episodes a week now with Unbinged. So it's essentially, if there is a good show on TV and you are watching it, we are too. And then we're having that conversation about each episode right after. So you can join us for each of those. And the idea is we want it to be just kind of like your group chat with your friends, man. You're coming up with your theories. You're talking about the things you loved, you hated. Why would that character do that? Why is the story going in this direction? And so we just have a lot of fun with it.
That's awesome, man. Well, again, thanks so much for joining me. And thank you for watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. You know the drill. Please like, please subscribe, please click the little notification bell or whatever the thing on your podcast platform happens to be. The best thing you could do to help this show grow right now is go over to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, drop a really nice review. That is where we're really trying to maximize some growth right now. And so thanks so much for that. And I will see you next week with another outstanding guest on Dynasty Compass.